So this is chapter 2, where we get to see how to mark up text. HTML, hypertext markup language, involves learning a list of elements and learning how the elements are used. So that's learning HTML, is what are the things and how are you supposed to use them to effectively structure your content and potentially to provide extra meaning to your content. So our tags, known as markup, are to provide extra meaning to that content. As I've already mentioned in the Kahoot, the main two types of tags are structural. So these would be like heading 1, heading 2, paragraph, image, list, things some that we haven't learned yet. But then there are a few elements that, in addition to providing maybe a little structure, they primarily impart meaning. They explain what the meaning of this content is in terms of this thing should have emphasis. This is an address. This isn't just a paragraph. This is an address, like a physical address. Or this is an abbreviation. So that's some extra meaning that the tags impart. Those are our main two types. So these are all of our headings. Taking this in, this is straightforward. So H1 to H6. And what we're going for here is it doesn't matter how these style. They are going to apply style by default without you writing any CSS. But you don't use an H2 because you like the size that it is. We should handle sizing in CSS. We use an H2 because this content logically is a second level heading. It's underneath some broader heading 1. Does that make sense? So I know this, you'll be tempted to like do it the wrong way and it'll look fine and nobody would know it unless they look at your code. But I would like for you to do this right. It is the case that some of the main customers who read your structure are search engines. When Google reads your sites and indexes it, you structuring it correctly for it helps it understand your page. Understand. You follow me? So it understands, okay, this is the main heading. These are some subheadings. And it can extract meaning from that. If you were to lie and make all of your headings like paragraphs and then style them to look like headings, you could do that, but then you've taken away the ability for Google or a screen reader for a visually impaired person to understand, oh, this is a heading. This isn't just a paragraph. Does that make sense? Like, to me, that's the essence, that's the core of what's underneath all this HTML stuff, is structure it correctly based on the actual structure, not just so it looks right, but so it is right. This is how your headings would look by default with the default styling. These are paragraphs. We love paragraphs for putting content in. By default, a paragraph is always going to have like a line break and some space underneath of it and above it. Like so. And it doesn't matter, like if you had a really narrow browser, like if you looked at this same HTML on your phone, there would be more lines of text, but there would still be this space here and space here. That's what the paragraph is going to be, how it's going to be rendered. It's going to take up 100% width. It's going to be as wide as it can be on the user screen. We can make things bold and italic. If you really just want to make something bold and make it italic, then you can use the B tag and the I tag. So B makes things bold and I makes things italic. That's pretty straightforward. And this is how it would look here with a word in bold and a word in italic. So note that the B and the I are typically going to be inside of some other element, right? It's just some of the words are bold, some of the words are italic, but they're in a paragraph. All right? This doesn't come up that much, but when it does, this is the way to do it. The sup tag, I can't hear this without hearing like sup dog, makes a superscript. You know, when it like raises the letters a little bit. So if you've got the word after a 4 or a RD after a 3. Likewise, if you want a squared, like E equals MC squared, you would get this. You can also do sub, which is subscript, where it kind of lowers the text underneath there. You can see this. So if you actually want this behavior, use sup and sub. I guess you could probably do something with CSS, but it would be much harder. And this really is telling it correctly. That's what that is. Like, this is not just, these are special TH. This is kind of special structurally. Okay. I mentioned this before in class, but white space is collapsed, and that means if you have 14 spaces, when it's rendered, you have 1 space. If you have 15,000 new lines in your code, like there's several extra new lines there, when it's rendered, it's just 1 space. So this way you can structure, or you can write your code however you want to, and it'll render like content. So you see, that is how this page would be rendered. Well, even though all those spaces were in there, they just squished down to 1 space. So you can put your code on new lines as however you want, and it won't be rendered that way. It'll word wrap normally. If, however, you actually want to put a line break in, you want a new line, you can do that with this BR. And let me mention this on the board. There are some elements that don't really have the idea of an opening and closing tag. And a line break is one of those. Can you imagine if we mean put in a line break, put this on a new line, what content would you put in between the start of the line break and the end of the line break? The answer is nothing. I don't ever want anything. It doesn't make sense for anything to be there. So HTML says if you have an element that doesn't have actual content in between opening and closing tag, then you can create a self-closing tag. And a self-closing tag means we have our normal opening tag, a space, a slash, and the closing angle bracket. So this is equivalent to this. So this is the technically correct way of creating a self-closing tag. So it's one tag that's an opening and a closing. Fortunately, maybe for us, the browsers are a lot like the Lord. They are long-suffering, they put up with a lot of mistakes, and they forgive repeatedly. So if you don't put this slash there, the browser is like, okay, I get it. You want a line break. So since it will forgive you, most people would just write it as BR without the slash. So use these carefully, though. If you're really just needing a paragraph, then put in paragraphs. On the whole, you got to get used to the fact that you can't control everything on the web because you have no idea what size device your site's going to be seen on. If it's a laptop or one of those like crazy 47-inch wide monitors that's like this way, it's like this tall and it's curved. Does somebody have one of those? Oh, that would be a good icebreaker. How big is your monitor? And then we can judge you. Which one? Your biggest monitor, I guess. You might use these if you were writing poetry. I would say poetry where you very intentionally, it's like not a new paragraph, but it needs to be a new line. This should be an appropriate reason to use line breaks. This just looks bad unless this is a poem, but I don't think it's a good poem. But they intentionally put a line break here and a line break here, is what they're showing. Sometimes it's helpful to put just a horizontal line to kind of separate one section from the next section. And HR is the same deal. So HR stands for horizontal rule. And it has the same deal where it's a self-closing element and I'm confident if you didn't put the slash in, the browser would be fine. I will say, like, potentially use these cautiously, because if you don't, you'll make a website that looks like it was made in the 90s. To me, that's what it evokes. If you overuse these, like, you're basically saying this is different sections, and there are other visual cues that you can make in CSS that might be better ways of saying this is a different section. But here's a tool in your toolbox for when it may be useful. Okay, semantic markup, like I've mentioned before, like I feel like OT, you asked perfect question. Why would I use this when it does the same thing as something else? And it's this nuanced answer of this M tag adds emphasis. So for some reason, you're saying these words get emphasis. Whether that appears as bold or italics visually, it kind of doesn't matter, and you could control that or change it. It does one of the two by default, and honestly, I can't remember what it is right now. Do y'all remember what emphasis does? Like, emphasis does one and strong does the other. Okay, so they, by default, italic, things that get emphasis are rendered in italics. And things that get strong, that makes sense, strong is bold. So there was this whole flame war 15 years ago where this snobby HTML standard writer said, there should be no stylistic information in HTML. Don't define styles, just define your content. So they removed B and I, even though they'd been there since the beginning, because B and I, sorry, that's bold and italics, are style information. You with me? And they were basically saying, if you want to make something styled a certain way, then use CSS. That's what CSS is for. HTML is just for defining structure. So what they did was they got rid of B and I and they added EM and strong. But you see, it's not that different from bold and italics, but they had a little bit more semantic meaning. And then when the next version of HTML came out, they're like, no, just let bold and italics back. So then they came back in, and now we have everything. So if you want to provide extra information, that's the reason to use these semantic things, and we're not using it to get the presentational stylistic effects. So one thing to keep in mind is that not everybody is the same as you. There are lots of people in the world that don't have as many abilities as you do, and that's a good thing to keep in mind in general. And in specific, even vision. There's a lot of people with visual disabilities. I think, honestly, I don't know the stats, but anybody that's older than 50 has impaired vision, pretty much, you can guarantee. And they're going to be probably increasing the font size on their device to see it. You with me so far? So just because you can see it doesn't mean everybody can see it. And if you want your site to work for everybody, which you do, then it's appropriate to keep those people in mind. So some people with very bad vision impairment have screen readers that read sites to them. And when you give them this extra information, like emphasis, then the screen reader can actually communicate that differently. Does that make sense? The screen reader can actually say, like, this is my heading. Or, right, more impactfully, if they're having to fill out a form, this is the label that goes with this text box. So that they know, okay, this is first name, press tab, enter first name. And even if they can't read it, the screen reader can read it to them. So I want to say, I'll hit on this later, but I think this is one of the things as a web designer that you can do that's actually, I would say, a matter of like moral and ethical implication. You can, I know it's extra work, and it's a small segment of the population, but by doing some things right, and I mean right in the moral sense, this is, to me, a right thing, a good thing that you can do to make sure that even that small percent of the population that can't see well or is visually impaired can still experience your site. Does that make sense?
Something else I want to mention is adding things that accommodate for people who have like edge cases oftentimes provides more options for people who don't have those edge cases but still want to use things. It's like screen readers, well, they're definitely helpful for people who have visual impairments. Some people might use it just to be able to listen to an article while they're working on something else.
It's true. Yeah, it's neat that oftentimes when you Like oftentimes it's you're forced to do this thing to make your thing more accessible. You end up kind of blessing more than just that edge case. That's a good point. For example, what do I want to say? I don't know if you've ever been to these sites. Like many government websites, there are regulations around accessibility compliance, and they'll make it so that it'll change the font size or it'll make it high contrast. The colors will be really high contrast and easy to see. It also, most of these semantic things make it much easier for a machine to understand and index your content. So if you label something as a block quote, then it's very easy for Google to understand, hey, this is a quote. This isn't what they wrote. It's somebody else wrote this. And that might then give it more information to let it be better indexed. So this is strong, which strong makes it bold, but the idea is this word in this sentence has more strength. So beware, pickpockets operate in this area. Whereas emphasis, which is italics, thanks for reminding me, shows that you can put different words in emphasis. So I think Ivy was the first. I think Ivy was the first. I think Ivy was the first, is how I would say it in English. And you see how in English, I imparted more information by emphasizing that word. And so you can do that in code as well. And it would look like this. All right. There are these ways of using quotes. If you really have a block quote, I see how this imparts a lot of information. You know, a block quote is when you have like a longer quote from somebody else. So you can say this is a block quote, and this is where it came from. You can have this cite attribute. You know it's an attribute because it has a something equals something, and the second something is in double quotes. I think by default, this will kind of like indent it. Apparently, there's also the Q. I don't see anybody use this. I would just use double quotes, to be honest. If it's just a regular quote, just use double quotes. But I guess it's good to know that this exists. But this block quote kind of indents it. And to me, very importantly, there is that citation that's in the background that could be followed. All right, we have abbreviations and acronyms like so. So you can say abbreviation. So we're saying that PROF is an abbreviation, and it's an abbreviation for professor. Likewise, this acronym, I guess NASA is technically an acronym, not an abbreviation, because each of those letters stand for something. Honestly, I don't see this used very much, but it is a thing that's defined in HTML and provides more meaning. And you see that the visual benefit that you get is if you hover over NASA, which is what they're doing in this screenshot, then it will pop up the long name. So that could be useful. I'll say my opinion, though, is if you're using an abbreviation or an acronym that the users don't know, then you should just put that in parentheses after it. Just tell it to them. If I were going to go to that effort, I would do that. Here's a way to cite things. So there is this cite. So we're saying a brief history of time is a citation. It's a book. And this is a way to say I am providing a definition with DFN. I also don't see these used very much, but I see how they do impart more information and would only benefit search engines to index your site better and potentially screen readers. This one is potentially useful as well to identify this whole block is an address. These aren't just two random paragraphs. This whole thing is an address. Yeah. Now these I do see used a good bit, so do file these away in the, I might need these later. Sometimes you want to visually and in structure say, hey, I'm taking out this old content and I'm adding in new content. And that's what the delete and insert mean. So you see here, it's as if they're saying, it's going to end up looking like the word worst with a line through it. But what this is explicitly saying is delete the word worst and insert the word best. I think it'll underline best. Another related one is the S for strike through. I found this one to be most useful. This is every single thing that's on Amazon, right? It's never the price that it says. It's always marked out and there's a lower price. And this is the markup to do this. So you see, this looks like this. This and this look the same. And the idea is semantically, this DEL means delete this content and then maybe you insert the thing that comes afterward. Whereas this just means just strike through. It doesn't have the idea of deleting content, which is a really nuanced difference. But if you want to strike through something like this, then just remember S. All right, summing it up, HTML elements are used to describe the structure of the page. Things like headings, subheadings, and paragraphs, lists, and images, which we'll learn in the future. Mostly, we're going to define structure using HTML. Secondly, occasionally, HTML elements provide semantic information, meaning. They actually impart more meaning. And this is a picture of a web page on a MacBook. Blam. All right, how we feeling? You doing okay? Okay. I'd like to introduce an assignment. Are you ready? Chester, you good? You ready for this? Okay, I know you guys are like, I'm paying so much money to take this class and he's not giving me any assignments to do and to learn. I don't like this. I'm not getting my money's worth out of this class. All right, so this is the first assignment I'd like us to do. Let me explain it in words. I might just show you what somebody did last year, honestly. I want you to find 7 examples of stylistic trends in web design. And to do that, I would recommend doing, hang on to yourself, research. But this is the research that I'm suggesting. I think it's pretty easy. The output of this is going to be a set of Google Slides, okay? Google Slides. You know Google Slides? Google Slides. Just make Google Slides, okay? Can you just make Google Slides? You hear me? There's always some art majors that are like, no, I've got to use Figma or some Adobe product to turn in something, which is acceptable, I guess. But I just like Google Slides. It makes it much easier for me to interact with you. Okay, so we are going to focus on 7 trends that I would classify as stylistic. So it's not about the structure of your page, but about the style, which might mean the color or other things. This is what I'd like you to do. Like if I were doing it, I would start with a Google search that's like Web Design Trends 2025. And usually you'll find, let's skip the sponsored ones, that there are a lot of people who have written articles trying to identify, predict what's new and cool for this year. You could certainly also look for 2024, and those are probably still going to be trendy. So you're going to be overwhelmed with options, okay? And my point is that you look around and find some that you actually like. Or maybe if you hate them, that might be another reason to include them. So bold, expressive fonts is what they're calling this, and they have this example, that typography continues to evolve in web design with expressive typefaces that capture attention and establish a clear brand voice. And then they're using this example as a bold, expressive font. You can agree or disagree, it's fine. Like all this is pretty subjective. Anti-design and a human touch. Designers embrace imperfection. So a design trend is to make things that have clashing colors and overlap and almost look bad. Designers, ugh. Okay, big blocks with vivid contrast. I could see that. Here's one that I see. This words that have like a gradient color. They're not a single color, but a gradient. I see that coming up a lot, and especially it seems like related to AI. I think Apple's doing it and Google's doing it with their AI products. So that could be one. Other stuff, here's a broader one, brutalist design. Have you heard of brutalist? So here's an example. Ooh, motion design, that's cool. So lots of micro interactions and movement on the page. All right, so this is just one site that I clicked on of many. So I'm asking you to do the research, find some things that you kind of like, that make sense to you. Some of these, to me, are going to be like this, like ethical, sustainable, and accessible web design. That feels a little bit more abstract than what I would like on this assignment. I'm thinking about things that you can actually point your finger on. That's more than just, well, to me, simple and inclusive language. Like, I'm all for that, but that's, to me, not a stylistic trend.
Yeah, this feels like it's entirely missing the question that the article asked. What are the top 10 most design trends?
Maybe, but like this micro interactions, I would say absolutely. You know, these micro interactions are where you can like hover and something kind of changes, but it's not super big. So what I'm asking you to do is find 7 of these that you kind of like, that make sense. And I want you to find three examples of websites that illustrate this trend. Which actually, once you know the name of it, or once you read several of these articles, I think you'll pretty easily be able to find some websites or Google some examples of sites that do that trend. Or it may just be stuff that you find in the sites that you look at. I will say, if you turn this in and you use like 3 websites, and those 3 examples are the same examples on all 7 trends, that looks lazy to me, and I wouldn't expect a great grade. You with me? So you're going to have 21 pictures in the whole slide set. You with me? Three for each of the 7. Also, for the sake of completeness, I would like you, so this is what this says here, give me the trend name, give me 3 screenshots of examples, and if you could just, in the presenter's notes, give me a 1 or 2 sentence summary. 1 sentence is fine if you can fit it in one. What is this trend about? And I'm going to give you access to this Google Doc, but I want to just explain it with my words. So like, just in your own words is fine. If you really want ChatGPT to summarize it, you can. But to me, it would be better for you to actually know in your own words. Like, I would like to know that you understand and you weren't just copy pasting what you found online. Really, what I'm hoping this gives you is a vocabulary to talk about the trendy stuff, where if you don't know the word parallax, I don't know if they would consider that trendy anymore, then you don't even know how to Google it to look up how to do parallax. But you've seen a parallax site before, but you probably didn't know that that's what that style was called. Does that make sense? So it's building your vocabulary and creating, like giving you a toolbox of styles that you like, so that later when you're building stuff, you can build stuff that's trendy. Does this make sense? So we'll talk more about this on Friday, but on the whole, read, collect some stuff, and you're just making slides. I try to do slides because I think that's easier than other stuff. So it should be very visual. I would really rather have, for every trend, give me 1 slide that is the like the title slide of the trend, and then give me 3 slides where I've got like a full page, 1 picture per slide. I don't need you to cram all 3 of them onto 1 slide. I can just scroll through them and see it and experience it. Always give me a title slide that introduces the thing, and give me a conclusion slide that kind of wraps everything up. You with me? I really want to emphasize, if you don't have an introduction and a conclusion, I don't think you have a complete thing, and I would like you to look and be professional. I would like you to read the next chapter. I think it's still short and boring, and it just introduced lists, and we got to get these boring HTML elements in our tool belt so we can start building stuff. And hopefully this assignment is a little bit more fun, and maybe you'll discover some cool stuff that you didn't know was out there. I'm thinking this will be due, let's make it due about Friday of next week. So this will be due in a week and 2 days. And I'll make sure that I have this completely on Canvas for you by class time Friday. But now, if you want to go ahead and start doing some research, Web Design Trends 2025, Web Design Trends 2024 would be pretty good Google searches. Y'all take care of yourselves. I hope it's a really good day.